We are live from Boston. Welcome to Tennis Talk Daily. Come hither, tennis fans. Let's do some tennis talking. Well, the U.S. Open has been completed for a while. It's been a little bit of a break. We had quite a run, didn't we? It was a daily extravaganza, and I'm just proud of what we've done. I'm proud of again, not just me, but I'm proud of what all of us did in terms of following the U.S. Open. It was so much fun. And I really do think that we were on pretty much the cutting edge of all the issues. Remember, I was on within seconds after the Serena Williams versus Naomi Osaka final, talking about those issues, talking about the same issues that have been getting, batted back and forth all week, and I think anticipating most of the questions, in fact. I think Martina Navratilova agrees with Aaron over at Tennis Talk Daily on just about all the things I was saying, but I want to talk a little bit about Serena. I did have the cover photo that indicates that Serena has had something of a fall. I do believe that we have seen the fall of Serena Williams. Don't talk stuff about Serena. I'm getting a comment, of course. Don't talk stuff about Serena unless you're a sexist. Well, if maybe that was a facetious remark. I'm not entirely sure. But it is hard to talk about these issues in this kind of climate without being accused of sexism. I will admit that. Well, listen, we have lots of stuff to talk about. We're not just going to talk about Serena Williams. Of course, anytime I talk about Serena Williams, I also want to talk about Naomi Osaka, because every moment we spend talking about Serena is really, throwing shade on Osaka, who is this wonderful rising star who we're going to be covering very intensely, very closely. She is my inspiration to really start getting into the women's tour, because I want her to burn the house down. I want her to take over the women's tennis world, and someone needs to dominate in that sphere. I believe it's been a strange ride over the past, say, couple of years, basically the past 8 slams. Hey there, Farzan, nice to see you. Thanks for coming on. But it's been the past 8 slams for the women. There's been 8 different Grand Slam champions. So we are really in sort of a period of transition, but it's about time for someone to come up and start dominating, and I think it's going to be Osaka. But I also want to talk about, let me see, I got my little index cards here. I want to talk about Djokovic. I got some really challenging comments on my video with respect to Djokovic. Listen, we went on 2 seconds after the match. I was literally ready to go. I was all teed up before the last point was played in the Djokovic match. We were on right after the match. So there is a bit of a occupational hazard, as it were, when you go right on after the match. I have to kind of digest this stuff and try to develop the nuggets for you with respect to that match, and I did so. And I think some of these mainstream journalists, they do come on to YouTube sometimes and they look at what the little guy is saying. They're probably not going to be watching, and I'm talking about folks from the New Yorker. I want to talk about the New Yorker article on Djokovic, which used the exact terminology that I used in my nugget with respect to Djokovic in describing the Djokovic versus Del Potro final. The New Yorker, in an article that I'll talk about in a bit, they used exactly the same language. And though it's a term that is used, the term is neutralize. I call Djokovic the neutralizer. That's what he does. He neutralizes the weapons of others. And in connection with that proposition, I said that he doesn't have any conspicuous weapons himself. And I stand by that proposition. But he has really an all-encompassing weapon of sorts, his weapon of choice. It's not a conspicuous weapon, but he has this sort of all-encompassing weapon of neutralization. He neutralizes other people's weapons, specifically neutralizes serves. That's what he does best, and that's why he won the U.S. Open. And that's what the New Yorker guy, let me see, what was his name? Gerald Maserati, in an article the next day, so he had 24 hours to go out and research this, an article entitled, Novak Djokovic isn't the most beloved player, but he is the best. Or most beloved player at the U.S. Open, but he is the best. Now, I didn't say that. I mean, I think I did make a suggestion that it's just kind of pointing out the reality, folks. He isn't the most beloved player for one reason or another. My pledge to you, particularly for the Djokovic fans among you, was that, you know, I will do my best to try to figure out what makes this guy tick. I mean, he is a force to be reckoned with. He does have a weapon of sorts. I want to talk about this, but it's the weapon of neutralization. It's the backhand is, but I would, if you ask me, and thank you for mentioning that, I think that it's not as conspicuous. That's the term I used. It's not as conspicuous as, for example, I don't know, the Federer serve, or, you know, the Federer kick serve, for example, or the Delpo forehand, or even the Nadal forehand. It's not as a conspicuous of a weapon. I want to talk about that because not having a conspicuous weapon is also a strength. This is one of the points I was trying to make. I got some really challenging comments, some people that love Djokovic. He is a great serve returner. That's what he does. But the term that I used, and thank you for that comment, the term that I used was neutralization. And then I basically called him the neutralizer. I've called him a couple of things. We've likened him to a few animals. Some of the Djokovic fans do not like the idea of Djokovic as a hyena. I've called him the elastic hyena. I meant that as a term of endearment and a way to describe, you know, what he does best, in a way. Of course, he slays the legends. He slays the lions in a way, which is what hyenas do. They're not cowardly animals at all. They are fierce animals, in fact. But another term that's been thrown out there is cheetah because he's so fast, and maybe that's one we'll use. I don't want to insert controversy into this. I want to find, you know, the animal. If we're going to use animals, I want to find the animal that's most descriptive. The only problem with the cheetah is that I was kind of reserving all of the cat-like animals for Federer because I think he's the ultimate cat on the court. So that I think is something that kind of essentializes his style of play. I want to talk about Federer's style of play. He made some comments on his style of play and whether he wants we've talked about this before in terms of carrying on Federer's stylistic legacy. He made some comments this week that touch upon that issue, which I think are really important. I want to get to that. But there's just so much to talk about. We're not going to get to all of it, but I'm going to come on live and do a lot more this week. We do have the St. Petersburg Open, and as well as the Moselle Open that occurs in Metz, France. And those tournaments are occurring right now. They are at the 250 level. There's only 32 players in the main draw. We do have Dominic Thiem, who I love Dominic Thiem. I just the way he played at this year's U.S. Open just really inspired me, and it really convinces me that he is again a force to be reckoned with, and I think one of the people that could slay someone like Djokovic ultimately. Certainly has the capability of doing that to Nadal, even though he didn't quite manage that. He managed to basically oust Nadal from the tournament by taking Nadal to 5 sets and really wearing him out. I mean, basically the 5-set match with Thiem was the reason that Rafael Nadal had to retire, I think, in the end. If that had been a cleaner match for him, if it had been a straight set victory, he probably wouldn't have had to retire. But Thiem, here's an interesting fact about Thiem. There is nobody in the sport right now who has been in the top 10 for as many consecutive weeks as Thiem has, except Nadal. So Thiem holds that distinction. He is a mainstay in the top 10. Really interesting. He is a performer. He's more consistent in many respects than someone like Alexander Zverev, but he's absolutely posting the results that we would want to be seeing in terms of predicting that he'll be doing better in the coming years. Remember, finalist at the French Open. a killer on the red dirt for sure. And now this run at the U.S. Open was absolutely tremendous. So he's one we have to keep a very close eye on, folks. A mainstay of the top 10 and potentially on the road to number one. And then finally, I also want to talk about Roger and Roger's tie breaks. A couple weeks ago, I guess it was a couple of months ago now, time is just a blur because I love tennis so much. And I love talking about it, and it just kind of gets blurry in a way. But it was a while back. I think it was at Halle. It was at Halle. I posted a video. Yes, let's talk about Stan the Man. The Stanimal, we can talk about him a bit as well. He's going to be at St. Petersburg, I believe, and he also won today, as I understand. Let's see. No, he's not in Metz, I don't think. Yeah, he's going to be at St. Petersburg, and interesting addition. Let's see. I'm trying to find him in St. Petersburg here. What's? Oh, well, we will get to that in a second. But I posted a video about Roger and tie breaks, and I called him the master of the breaker. Now, that was just an intuitive thing I had. He was doing real well in the tiebreakers at Halle up until that point. And I posted a video. The cover photo said, we had a picture of Federer, and it said, master of the breaker. A few of you probably remember that. But the next day, of course, he lost the final to Coric, and one of the reasons for that loss was that he lost the tiebreaker. I think it was in the final set. Or maybe it was the first set. I'm not sure, but, you know, losing the tiebreaker was a key part of why he lost that match. And then then you had the Millman match where Federer botched all those tiebreakers with Millman as well. But so people were giving me a hard time. They're saying, Aaron, he's not the master of the tiebreaker. He just screwed up the tiebreakers. He can't deliver the clutch tennis in the breakers. And I stated at the time, I said, well, I don't think it matters. Those are just particular matches. If you add up all the numbers, I think Federer's, you know, still the master of the breaker. I did a comparison in terms of like how many the winning percentage in the breakers as between Federer and Nadal. I did crunch that number. But I found some new numbers that I want to share with you about Federer in tiebreakers. And to save you the suspense, I might as well tell you now because I'm not going to be able to stay on for very long today. I have to go pick up my son. But actually, I have to put antifreeze in my car first and then go pick up my son. So I'll have to leave a couple of minutes. But to save you the suspense, Federer has the winningest percentage. He has the best win percentage in tiebreaks in the history of tennis. And we can get into the specifics. But Djokovic is up there too. But I do think that Federer, again, across the length of his career, is the master of the breaker, and the numbers prove it. And this is just a number I came across recently. I sort of intuited that when I put up that cover photo and talked about him. But the reality is that, yes, the numbers show, and it's something on the order of 61% wins in his tiebreaks over the course of his career. And he has a particularly good percentage in the tiebreaks in the title matches, the 1,000 level and Grand Slam title matches. So that makes Federer the master of the breaker. Now, we could ask the question, in light of recent experience, he seems to be not dealing with the breakers as well in these last few matches, say these last few months. And we'll just have to see how that works out. I mean, it might be one of the signs that the Federer we once knew is not quite 100% there anymore, probably because of age, just probably because of the normal course and trajectory of tennis careers, folks. It's nothing big or it's nothing dramatic in a way. It's kind of quotidian. It's just what happens. It's what happens to athletes. They rise and they fall. Well, one indicator that he may be falling a bit. I'm not saying I've always maintained the proposition that we're going to see a lot more great tennis from Roger Federer, but one indication that there may be something of an inflection point here is that, and possibly a little turning back, maybe his form is going to fall maybe a bit, is that he's not performing as well in the breakers. Okay, so that's kind of an itinerary. Really, that covers a lot of what I wanted to cover. We can go back and cover a couple of things in more detail. With respect to Serena Williams, folks, I don't want to get too far into this. I agree with Martina Navratilova personally that before we start talking about a double standard, which is pretty much unprovable, I think. I'm not. Let me know if you've read some articles where the articles are actually citing evidence that this particular judge that Serena Williams attacked. I want evidence that this particular judge declined to give a penalty on the magnitude of the penalty he gave to Serena Williams for comparable conduct. Now, she called him a thief, but you have to read all of that in the totality of the circumstances with Serena. She was wagging her finger, and it was getting real mean with Serena. So I want you to point it. If you know of an article or if you've seen an article, let me know. If there's people that are arguing that this particular judge has been easier on the men. Now, the other contextual piece of this is that they were in a Grand Slam final. Now, that's important because it matters more. In a way, we want the judges to be more stringent, more strict in a Grand Slam final than they would be necessarily, I don't know, in the first round or whatever. I mean, because the whole world's watching, you know. We want the decorum kept up. We want to do the sport proud. So, you know, I wouldn't disagree with the idea that judges are look a little closer at things when you have a final in play, and you know, the implications of a final, I do think, suggest that you want to keep a close eye on things. The whole world's watching. Again, no one's watching in the first round. No one's against the no-name player. Serena has a responsibility. Serena, you're saying you shouldn't. I got a comment that you shouldn't even call stuff like that in a final. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm just going to kind of try to get on with this point, which is that we don't want to talk about a double standard until there can be some evidence that what she did was. But there's no evidence of a double standard, I don't think. So, but the more important question is, was what she did acceptable? We need to answer that question. If it wasn't acceptable, then particularly when you got a situation where you can't, it's unprovable in a way. She's just kind of floating these accusations. Serena said something to the effect of male players had called judges thieves, but she didn't really point to a specific instance. I can't remember the last time a male player. I can't remember the last time a male player called a judge a thief. I mean, listen, John McEnroe, I can remember a couple of outbursts by John McEnroe. There probably is some stuff going on in the lower ranks. Again, unknown players, no names. But there again, Serena, as arguably the greatest women's tennis player of all time, a model for so many people, she, in a way, should be held to a higher standard. Don't you think? Because everyone's watching. No one cares about what, you know, Daniil Medvedev is doing, even though he's actually a very good player, an up-and-coming player. But just as an example, I mean, not many people, the world doesn't really care what Daniil Medvedev and Stefanos Tsitsipas, their little exchange there in Miami. I mean, that was a bit of news or whatever, but no one really cared that much about it. But when you got a final, you have Serena Williams. She, in a way, owes a higher standard of conduct that has nothing to do with her sex. It has nothing to do with her sex or gender. It has something to do with her fame, her exposure, the extent to which she is a role model for so many people. Well, there are standards, in other words. There are double standards, but there is not, I don't think it's a sexual double standard. I think it's there are standards that apply differently to different players because they're in different situations, you know. Serena Williams is one of the greatest players in the sport. The whole world is watching her. She needs to be held to a standard, and arguably to an even higher standard than someone that's a no-name that no one cares about, who's getting ousted in the first round anyway. Moreover, it was a final, so even more of the world was watching, and she basically embarrassed herself all the more. Well, the big news on Serena, and I won't go on and on and on about this, but there was the cartoon that was published. I think it's in an Australian newspaper. Basically, the cartoon, and there's allegations that the cartoon is racist, sexist, etc. And the cartoon showed Serena jumping up and down like a little brat, having a tantrum. Meanwhile, the umpire is in the background saying to the other player, who's supposed to be Naomi Osaka, but in fact, the illustrator made Naomi Osaka into a white blonde girl, and the judge is asking the white blonde girl, "Can you just let her win the match? You know, Serena's having a fit over here. Can you just let her win?" So there's a couple of interesting things about that. I mean, there's nothing misrepresentative about it. Serena Williams was having a little childish fit, and the cartoon very correctly depicted the extent to it meant to sort of illuminate that part of it, that she was being childish. Well, I think they did that, and that was a good point to make. In terms of the white woman, I mean, let me know what you guys think about this. What I think he was trying to do, and I haven't read a lot of accounts about this, I make my own judgments, because I read such garbage out there from people. I have to limit my intake of the garbage. Not particularly with tennis, but when it comes to kind of controversial issues like this, it's just none of it is trustworthy. The garbage that's written about this, it's very partisan, very ideological, and we have this thing going on in the United States. It's called the Me Too movement, which is sort of an effort by women to kind of empower women as against males who are sexual predators. And though this doesn't involve any sexual predator with Serena Williams, it really does resonate with the Me Too movement. I consider it part of the Me Too movement. There's also the NFL kneeling that has occurred, the protests against racism by athletes. So it's part of a context that we need to understand what happened with Serena Williams, to be sure. But in terms of what the artist was trying to say with respect to making Osaka into a white woman, a white blonde girl, well, I think part of the comment here was a clever comment. Osaka is black. She's a black woman, or at least her father is Haitian, and I mean she's part Japanese and part black. And so I think there was a play there. I mean, you had two women out there, two black women. You can't. I think that was part of what the artist was trying to say. I mean, let me know what you think about this. Whether you thought this cartoon was racist. I said I saw nothing about it that was racist at all. By depicting by depicting Osaka essentially as a white blonde girl, I think it was just a way to parody the fact that no one was realizing that, to the extent you believe Serena Williams is a black woman who has had to deal with oppression based on being a black woman, and that's part of why she acted out. Well, you've got Naomi Osaka over there who's also black. So I think by depicting her as white, I think the illustrator wanted to basically shine light on the fact that Osaka's black. And she's also a woman. There was probably more to it. I would have to think about it, but I don't think there was anything overtly racist about it. But let me know. I mean, I think it was sort of fair game in this context. But let me know. Listen, when I say that there is a fall of Serena Williams, the cover photo says "Tempest in a tutu." She likes to wear a tutu. She was doing little twirls. But of course, she's a stormy person. She's got lots of issues. There was a lot of anger in Serena Williams. Serena Williams has an anger problem, folks, and she probably needs to see a therapist, I think. I would suggest to her, she's not going to listen to me, but I would suggest to her that she sees a therapist rather than have an outburst and embarrass the United States, embarrass herself. downplay and belittle the tremendous achievements of Naomi Osaka. I mean, there was everything about what Serena Williams did was wrong. I've seen videos about, is there a double standard? I've seen stories. I don't think it's a proper question. I don't think we even get to that question. I don't think there's any evidence that there's a double standard. But I particularly don't think we get to that question for the reasons that Martina Navratilova stated. I often agree with her when it comes to these kind of issues. Martina and I agree about the grunting. She calls grunting a form of cheating, which I basically agree with. Although my claims with respect to grunting have become aimed primarily at the women's side now. Because I think we need to tackle the big problems first, and I think on the men's side, the grunting is actually pretty tame as compared to the Simona Haleps and the Sharapovas and so many of the women who are just screeching and hollering on the tennis court. It is a strange and bizarre sight to see, but that's the real problem. The women, it has to be rooted out on the women's side first. Nadal's grunts are really a drop in the bucket or whatever you want to call it. Nadal's grunts are very tame compared to Sharapova, Halep, and again, so many of the others. Well, the idea the nugget with respect to Serena Williams and the potential fall of Serena Williams is this: power corrupts. It's a principle that is often stated in connection with politics, but here it also applies. Hi, Liam. Nice to see you. But here it also applies. Power corrupts. And Serena Williams had a lot of power. I remember in the lead up to this final, the commentators were making a lot of comments about Serena, like she's just the mother of the U.S. Open. She owns this court. She comes out on this court, she plays like she owns it, and that's why she wins. And everybody was praising her for essentially taking ownership of every tennis court she steps out on. And then the final happened. And we got to see that attitude, that sort of self-righteous attitude of the idea that she owns the court, that she owns the umpire, that she owns Osaka, that she owns the crowd, that she owns everything, apparently. Everything was hers and her entitlement in that moment. And she didn't care about anybody else. She didn't care about her fans, because she was hurting her fans by doing this. She didn't care about Naomi Osaka. She didn't care about her own reputation, apparently. Listen, we don't have to go over this again. She broke down emotionally and basically fell to pieces in the course of this match. But the reason is, and this is the nugget with respect to Serena Williams, and the reason why I believe she may fall, it may be over for her. Folks, in her first 25 Grand Slam finals, Serena posted a 21-4 record, and that was through the 2015 Wimbledon. Since then, she's played in 6 finals, and she's only won 2 and 4 in Grand Slam finals since Wimbledon in 2015. Something is awry with Serena, and this little demonstration of hers, I think, is suggestive of the principle that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and Serena Williams was corrupted by her own success and power. And she's either going to make some changes and get religion, or she's going to fall. That's my prediction. And it looks like she's not going to make any changes. It looks like she's just going to dig her heels in and try to justify this. Well, she's made a couple of comments that suggests she's softening up. The first comment I liked, which was, I could maybe learn something from Osaka, because Osaka was just saving break points like gangbusters in this tournament. She saved 13 break points in her semifinal against Madison Keys, and that was really one of the keys to her winning. Her serve percentage, the extent to which she has played matches this year, without losing her serve is a very, very tremendous achievement. She leads in that category. There's no one on the women's circuit who has played more matches without surrendering a serve than her. So that was the key, and Serena said something like, I could probably learn something from Osaka. Well, yes, but you can learn more than that, Serena. Why don't you learn something from the great, and I will call her the great, or at least the rising, because I love Naomi Osaka. I love her. I love her personality. I love her style of play. She has a wicked topspin forehand. I love her attitude. I love the fact that she's just going to burn this house to the ground, Serena included. But she, meaning Serena, needs to learn much more from Osaka than just, how to hold serve. She needs to learn how to behave on a tennis court, to be honest. That's what she needs to learn from Osaka. Okay, so that's that. Listen, folks, I'm going to have to probably run here pretty soon, but I wanted to cover a couple more things. Maybe I'll come on a little later tonight. I'll definitely be on tomorrow. For those of you coming on, I would invite you to subscribe to this channel. We do some fun live commentary on this channel. We love tennis on this channel, first and foremost. People like to call me a Federer channel. It's silly. It's so silly. There's so much to contradict that. Video after video after video in which I hardly mention Federer's name. That's the kind of evidence that's there to contradict that. We love all tennis players. We love Djokovic. We love Nadal even. And I've had some past issues with Nadal, but I've grown to love him over the past couple of months. Although, I was reading that statistic just the other day again about the extent to which Nadal retires from these matches. Djokovic has retired from even more matches. I think Nadal has retired from 8 matches during the course of his career. And of course, there's Roger Federer, who has retired from exactly 0 matches over the course of his career. There's something in Federer that prevents him, even when he's hurting. I remember that final with what was it, Zverev at Montreal last year. His back was hurting. Even when he's hurting, he just plays through. I suppose maybe it's just happenstance. Maybe it's just that Federer has never had an injury on the magnitude of what Nadal was experiencing in the U.S. Open. Now, with Nadal's retirements, those are becoming more plentiful as he gets older, and that's sort of natural. But with respect to the point that I was making, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you get the notifications of the Tennis Talk Daily live stream. We are covering these 250 tournaments this week. We try to situate the commentary in the context of concrete matches, to be sure, without getting into abstractions. Well, I admit that my Serena Williams comments today, in a way, they're getting into abstractions in a sense, but on the other hand, we're tying it back to these matches. We're always tying it back to a concrete match, concrete statistics. We're not getting too philosophical on the channel, at least not these days, but we'll see what happens. It's a user kind of generated content, so if you guys, that's what you want, if you want more philosophical stuff, hey, I'm a former professor, actually kind of a current professor as well, but I know how to talk about philosophy, although sometimes I don't think it's particularly appropriate in tennis. But the final thing I wanted to mention is with respect to Djokovic. I had some comments, and I thought I was pretty kind to Djokovic after the U.S. Open final. Once again, we went on. I was live before the Djokovic versus Del Potro final had concluded. We were live. We were talking about things. We were making statements. We were developing nuggets about that match that a writer from the New Yorker later used in his article on Monday, I'm pretty sure. Basically, I called Djokovic the neutralizer. I said what he does is neutralizes serves. Now, neutralization is a term that's used among tennis people, so I'm not going to say to you that I'm absolutely certain that the New Yorker was kind of lifting some of the conceptual frameworks that I was articulating here, and conceptual frameworks I was articulating like right before the match was even over. Well, it took this guy a couple of days to kind of pick up on it, to do his research, potentially watch the Tennis Talk Daily videos so that he could essentialize the Djokovic, the key to Djokovic's winning with reference to this idea of neutralization. But I think Djokovic does have a weapon. It's not a conspicuous weapon, so I just want to state this for the record for you Djokovic people. But I think he has a weapon. It's not a conspicuous weapon. It's the weapon of neutralizing his opponent's weapons, and it's called neutralization. He is the neutralizer. He's also the elastic hyena. He's also potentially the cheetah. He's also maybe the Serbinator. We could come up with some other names for him. But here's the essential point about Djokovic. He doesn't have a conspicuous weapon. That's true. But also, correlatively, he doesn't have a weakness. You see, when a player has a conspicuous weapon like Delpo or even Federer's forehand, when they have conspicuous weapons, they almost always come with weaknesses. Isn't that true? So I think Delpo's backhand side is perceived as a weakness. I think people hit to Delpo's backhand, and they have some success doing so, to be sure. They enjoy some success doing so. It works. But with Djokovic, he doesn't have a conspicuous weapon, but he's got no weakness. He's got no weakness. So there's no target for people. The opponent has no target. The opponent can't come in with a silly little strategy like hit to Djokovic's backhand. Oh, you really don't want to do that. You'll get into trouble if you do that. But there's no weakness with Djokovic. So two things with respect to a kind of nugget about Djokovic. First, his weapon is not conspicuous, but he has a weapon, and it's a comprehensive weapon that has the effect of neutralizing his opponent's conspicuous weapons, such as serves and devastating forehands, for example, from Del Potro. So those are the 2 points about Djokovic that I want folks to understand, that at least that's kind of what I've come to. I've done some thinking about this, but he has no weakness. And that is a very important part of him because his opponents don't have anything to target. Djokovic can come to the Delpo match and just hit to Delpo's backhand, which he did in the final, and it worked pretty well. But he himself doesn't have a vulnerability that his opponents can prey on. He's just an across-the-board player. He's got all the tools. He's got a lot of weapons. None are conspicuous and devastating insofar as someone could sort of target them and, target the other side. If he had a great backhand, he could target the forehand. Well, you can't do that with Djokovic. He's got no weakness. Furthermore, he neutralizes. He can neutralize massive serves that would be basically unreturnable for so many other players. He can neutralize them. How he does it is oftentimes he'll backspin, oftentimes he'll block it back, and he just knows how to kiss the lines. Just get it back into the depth of the court and get it to the feet of the opponent often is the way to do it, but that's what he does. He neutralizes other people's conspicuous weapons, and he doesn't have a weakness for people to prey on. He's won 14 Grand Slams. He's got his eye on many more. We have issues to talk about with respect to the GOAT debate that I think is raised by the U.S. Open, but I'm going to save that for tomorrow. I want to thank you guys for participating. We've got lots more live commentary coming on Tennis Talk Daily, even in situations where we've only got the 250 tournaments. Well, Dominic Thiem is someone we're looking at really close. The Stanimal is another person we'll be looking at close. You got Fognini, we have Tsitsipas. There's going to be some interesting matches, but we have lots of other issues to talk about too. You're very welcome. Thank you for coming on to the live stream. I do wish you guys the best, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. I'm going to sign off from Boston for now. Bye-bye.